welcome you here today on behalf of the mentors and myself to the North Dakota Grazing Lands Winter Conference, the Soil, Grass, Animal, Human Health
They're also the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and we work pretty closely with them on a variety of avenues, as well as the Natural Resources Trust in North Dakota.
Okay, so we're going to talk about no banker needed. I realize that this might be a contentious topic. My husband actually said to me, "You're not really going to talk about that, are you?" Yeah, because that's what Josh said I should do. So we're going to talk about how to start with less and end with more. Just to give you a little background on our farm and how we do things, I'll go through that fairly quickly just so you kind of get an understanding where we're coming from. That is not my husband. He's in the pool with our kids. He'll be here later this afternoon. In the beginning, our farm is the 75th year that our farm has been in my family. It started with these folks right here. The gentleman in the back is my grandpa, William White Sr. The eyeballs peeking out over the top of my dad is my grandma, and that's my dad in the front. A lot of you might have known Bill White from Mercer. That was my dad. So they started in 1941. Grandpa they were both living in California. Dad was born there. They came in 1941 in October, right ahead of the war. Grandpa was fairly certain that there would be war, and he was afraid of being drafted. Grandma was originally from Mercer. So he came back with his wife and son and planted them here in Mercer. In case he was drafted, she had some support. So they came in 1941. Grandma milked about 10 to 12 cows. That's my grandpa out there with his sheep. There were sheep on our farm way back when. This is my great uncle's swine herd. He had a herd of pasturing pigs. This was not unheard of. And he raised a lot of great pigs. These happen to be his Durocs. And that's my great-grandpa's sheep out in Idaho. So our family has a history of raising different kinds of livestock on this farm and also in our past. In 1974, my parents got married. That's them right there. That's a picture at our wedding. The photographer told my parents that they should put their arms around each other. And my dad, if you knew him, had dry as the Sahara humor. And he's told the photographer in the straight, Big Bill voice, "We used to be able to do that." And so that's when the photographer captured that moment, and I love it. It's my favorite picture from our wedding. That's me, bronco busting. I was a champion mutton buster in my own corral. And so we ran a feedlot. We ran about 500 head of commercial ewes, and then I had a herd of purebred Suffolks. Dad had a herd of purebred Polypays, and then we had the commercial flock. We raised a lot of small grains. And then Dad got cancer in 93, and we sold the sheep because they were just too much work. And then we got into feeding calves. We were backgrounding calves. That is not our feedlot, by the way. It's just a great picture of a feedlot. So the end came about 1998. We did not know that this happened until my brother and I were cleaning out my dad's desk after he passed away. We did not know that he was getting these letters every week, every 2 weeks, from both FSA and the bank. And so this is a quote from one of the letters. This letter is to inform you and your lending institution that the guarantee of William and Sharon White may be in jeopardy if liquidation is not commenced soon. Threats like these were in all of these letters. You have to quit. The sooner the better. You need to get out. Another meeting with the Whites is not necessary. We're not going to meet with them. They have to sell everything. And finally, reamortizing or rescheduling is dependent on security remaining for the loan's repayment ability, which is fancy words for you need to pay it and you're done. My dad was able to save the land and put it into the CRP program. And my dad did not receive a CRP payment until 18 months before he died. Every CRP payment went straight to the bank to keep paying on this loan. My dad was out of farming in 1998. He finally himself received a CRP payment in 2010. So from 1998 to 2013, or 12, November of 12, that's what it looked like. It was all CRP. In November of 2012, John and I moved back to the farm. We got married on 7/7 of 07. You may think that was lucky. It was the only weekend my brother was going to come home. So that's when we got married. 6 weeks after we got married, we got one of those. So I need to figure out my stay-at-home mom job, right? Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to do this? So we lived on a small farm. We had a quarter section. And part of it was in CRP, part of it was tillable. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do? So first winter, I gestated and I Googled. Google was my friend. So I Googled things like small farm profitability, farming with small acreages, those kind of Google search terms, trying to find out what I could do with this small farm. We were living in Stutsman County at the time. I don't know if any of you are Stutsman County ranchers, but we could not compete with Stutsman County prices. We could not compete with Stutsman County equipment. So we knew we weren't going to farm the traditional way. I'd grown up on a conventional farm. John had grown up on a conventional farm. We just knew it wasn't going to work for us. So what are we going to do? We had no idea. We had Jana in May of 08. We had Henry in July of 09. And Eleanor was born this day 5 years ago. It's her birthday today. She'll be here this afternoon. You'll hear it. It's her birthday. And so we had 3 kids in 3 years. What are we going to do? And that's us now. Don't they look nice? We decided to form Morning Joy Farm at the time. We just added the kitchen. We decided to form Morning Joy Farm, and we started with a vegetable CSA. So CSA is community-supported agriculture. The community buys a share of the farm. So they invest their money in the farm in the spring, and then they get vegetables every week throughout the growing season. So we had all of our money up front by April 15th. We were usually sold out by February, but April 15th was the deadline. They gave us all the money. We turned around and bought seeds and stuff, and then they got food starting usually at the end of June. The first year we did it, John could not believe it. They're going to give us how much money, and they're not going to see a thing for 2 months? Yes, honey, that's how CSAs work. You're not spending any of that money. We're putting it in an account, and it's not going to be touched. Well, it's not exactly how CSA works, but okay. So that's what we did, and we started with a vegetable CSA. That's just 1 week's offering right there. I took a picture of it every week for the customers. And then in February of 10, John had been working as a machinist in Jamestown on a manufacturing facility, and he got one of these. We thought he was safe, but he wasn't, and they needed to lay off 4 machinists. So rather than, cut dead weight, they drew names out of a hat. And John Carlson was the name they drew out of the hat. So he got one of those, a pink slip, and he came home, and we said, well, what are we going to do? We had just watched Food Inc., and while we don't agree with everything in Food Inc., Joel Salatin really resonated with us. He touched a chord with us. We were already doing the vegetable CSA, we were already doing direct marketing, we already had that connection with customers, and then his passion for the land and for food and for customers really resonated with us. So I Googled him. I owe my farm to Google. I Googled him and found out that he not only was in this movie, but he wrote books. And I read books. And so I've told him, Joel, we were a match made in heaven, because you write them and I read them. And so I ordered 2 off of Amazon, and we read them in a weekend. I read You Can Farm. It's 486 pages. I usually read it every year. And John read Pastured Poultry Profits. We call it Triple P. John read Triple P in a weekend, when we looked at each other and we said, we can do this. We can do this. And so we did. Thanks to the friendship and encouragement and support of Mr. Ducard here. We have 3 tenants of our farm. Our family stays together. That's why we homeschool. I'm a public school teacher, the daughter of a public school teacher. It was not my plan to homeschool, and if 5 years ago you would have asked me, are you going to homeschool your kids? The answer would not have just been no, it would have been hell no. But God has different plans. So our family stays together. We love it. The second one, another part of the family stays together was that we would farm in a way that our kids could be involved. John, when we first started farming together and I was doing the CSA, he was still farming his few tillable acres, and he was spraying, and little Jana toddles out there and wants to touch the sprayer. And John just freaked out. Like, I can't do this. I can't deal with her being out here, and I can't farm in a way that she can't be with me. And so that was kind of a pivotal moment for us. So our family stays together, and we want to farm in such a way that our kids can always be involved. The second one is that the farm will regenerate the landscape and provide nutrients-dense food at fair prices. And that fair prices is both for the consumer and for ourselves. We want to be paid a fair wage. John and I are professional farmers. We get paid $22 an hour to farm. We want to also be fair to our consumers. Could I charge $30 a chicken? Yep, and some sucker would pay it. But we want as many people to eat that food as possible. So we want to have a fair price both for them and for us. And lastly, we want to build community. We want people to come to the farm. We want to host groups. We want to have our customers come and see how we butcher chickens. They come and watch us butcher chickens. Their kids love it. The adults are a little, I'm glad you do it. The kids jump right in. We were living in Sussex County, as I said, and we had a little bit of flooding issue. 2 out of 3 years, this is what our road looked like. Those are our vehicles parked on the road, and that's the lake that overtook us. 2 out of 3 years. And remember how we had kids every year? So I would strap a baby in a carrier to my chest, and we would push the jogging stroller a half a mile through soybean fields to get to our vehicles, or we would strap our teeny tiny little kids into their life jackets and we'd take a boat. That got old real fast. The last year we were there, we did that for 7 weeks. And John said, enough, let's move. And I just chalked it up to frustrated husband. And he said it a week later. And I said, well, okay, now we need to talk about this. Like, are you serious? Because if you are, we need to talk about it. And if you aren't, then stop saying this. And so he was serious, and we looked for land that was comparable to what we had, maybe closer to Jamestown or closer to Bismarck with a better road. We couldn't find it. We couldn't afford it. So I said, well, if we're going to move somewhere, let's move somewhere that means something to us. And my parents, like I said, had been retired. They were wintering in Tennessee now with my brother. And so we called my folks, and we said, hey, if you ever want to sell the farm, like John and I are interested, we wanted to move, we want to get out of here. We were taking eggs and other produce out on the boat and bringing in chicks in the boat. Like, it was a nightmare. So I said, think about it, pray about it, talk about it, don't give us an answer tonight. So we hung up. An hour later, they called back. Nothing would make us prouder than for you guys to take over the farm. And so we did. We went home. That's part of heaven. That's God's country, really. I'm sorry for the rest of you, but Wise Township really is God's country. And so we came back home to this place that raised me. And I love this quote from Wendell Berry. One could argue that the great breakthrough of industrial agriculture occurred when most farmers were convinced it was better to own a neighbor's farm than to have a neighbor. In the time from when Mom and Dad said nothing would make them prouder for us to take over the farm to when we actually moved to the farm, I lost my dad. And 4 months after we moved to the farm, I lost my mom. So they're both gone. And at both of their funerals, people came up to us and asked us what we were going to do with the land. At their funeral. It was better for them to have our land than it was for John and I to come home. It wasn't, hey, are you and John going to come back? We'd love to have you. It was, hey, what are you going to do with the land? We'd like to buy it. Ugh. So, take that, Wendell Berry. Okay, so a brief overview of what we do. This is going to go at lightning speed because I could talk about our farm all day. We raise pastured broilers. That's my handsome husband in front of one of our broiler pens. He's contemplating moving it. He will, but he's contemplating it. We raised laying hens. These happen to be black Australorps. We get a different breed every year, so these are the black Australorps. We raise pastured turkeys. They're really awesome. We love turkeys. I have 2 grass-fed, exclusively grass-fed, 100% organic dairy cows. That's Kierlick on the right, her heifer Connell on the left. Kierlick, I won in a silent auction, you guys. I won her in a silent auction. I actually won a fetus because she wasn't born yet. But we won pick of the herd out of a grass-fed organic dairy. So those are our 2. We're going to talk a little about them later. We raise grass-fed sheep, exclusively grass-fed lamb, which NDSU Extension will tell you can't do. We primarily raise Icelandics. We got a few Old English Southdowns that we're working with, but we primarily raise Icelandics. We pasture pork. Those are some of our pigs out snuffling around. That's our 7-year-old daughter, Jana. She sold cookies at the farmer's market last year, raised $300, decided she wanted to invest in the farm. So we said, well, what do you want to do? She decided to raise ducks for eggs because you can sell 6 duck eggs for price of a dozen chicken eggs. So she's got that. She also invested her time and effort into raising our one and only bottle lamb we've ever had. And so then she got to pick, it was a ram. She knew we were going to eat him. So she got to pick a ewe lamb out of the flock, and of course she picked the best one. So now she owns a sheep, and then she had some cash left over from starting her duck enterprise. So she asked her dad, well, how much money do I need to buy a pig? And he told her, and she threw her money on the table and said, now I own a pig. So I was speaking to Farm Credit Services this fall, and Aaron, the new CEO, was talking about who was their competition and what they had to look out for. And I thought, if you're not careful in 5 years, it might be Jana Carlson. So she's got 20 duck hens in our hoop house right now with our chickens, and it drives the chickens crazy. But she's raising duck eggs. This was the new addition last year. We built a commercial kitchen on the farm. My dad, in his infinite wisdom, had built a 40 by 40 heated shop, and so we just built a box in the shop that's Annie's kitchen. Our marketing strategies, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly too. The center of our marketing is our bulk orders. And what I mean by bulk orders are customers who order like 50 chickens. They're the customers who are ordering whole and half hogs, whole lambs, 5 turkeys. Those are our bulk order customers. They're our heavy hitters. They're the ones who are going to come back year after year. They're also the ones who are going to recommend us to others. So they're really the core of our marketing strategy. The next level outside of that is what we call buying club. So it's where you can buy our stuff by the piece. So you can say, well, I want a pack of pork chops, I want some bacon, I want some lamb ribs. If I was ever to commit a capital crime for which I would get a last meal, it would be barbecued lamb ribs. And I tell people that, so guess how many lamb ribs Annie gets to eat? None, because everybody loves them. Just keep my mouth shut. So that's our buying club. They also can buy stuff from the kitchen. So I make Coogan, granola, buns, muffins, like all sorts of stuff that they can buy out of the kitchen. The 2 circles in the middle are all people who know how to cook, right? They know what to do with a pork chop. They know what to do with a leg of lamb, for example. This next sphere is our freezer club. And these are people who want to eat whole food, they want to eat healthy food, but they're not really sure how to cook or they don't have time to. So we started a freezer club. Well, actually, I started it and John said I could. So that's how it happens. I started the freezer club, so you get 10 meals per month. And you also get 2 loaves of bread. You get a dessert. 3 of the meals are soups. 1 is a brunch. And the other, or 1 is a company meal, so like if your mother-in-law comes over. And the other 5 are like family-style meals. And so there's a rotation of 4 months. So in a year, you'd get the same thing 3 times. And then on the outside of that is our catering business. So those are customers who don't really care what they're eating, but you're at an event, so they'll eat it. And so we do catering on the outside. So now we're getting to the meat and potatoes. So why, ask why. Let's run the numbers. A little word about banks. John and I don't currently have any debt. We have 3 banks that like our money, but we don't take any money from them. Banks make money even when you don't. And if you don't think that's true, think about the concept of the vacation loan. So they will loan you money to go on vacation. Are you making any money on your vacation? No. So they really don't care if you make money or not because they're still making theirs. They make more money when you borrow more money, right? That's how the percentage thing works. There's no flat rate of interest, right? It's a percentage of what you borrow. So they like it when you borrow more. They encourage you to overinvest. Has anyone bought a home and the bank said, this is how much we'll finance you for, and you look at that number and go, holy mackerel. It's happened to a few friends of mine. They don't want you to quit borrowing money, right? Because they depend on your percentage to help fund them. So once you get solvent, they come up with a better idea, right? 2015 issue of Stockman Grass Farmer. If you're not reading Stockman Grass Farmer, start. It's the best investment you can make in your farm. Every dollar that's invested, they measured the dollar of return. For conventional agriculture, every $4 that's invested gets $1 of return. It doesn't seem right, does it? So we're putting up these monocline barns and we're building new feedlots and we're investing $4 hoping to get 1 back. Polyface Farm, where Joel Salatin is, they invest 59 cents for every dollar of return. So they want low inputs, low infrastructure. They don't want to spend a lot of money to get investment back. John and I have not run this number for our farm. We plan to, but it just hasn't happened yet. So if you want more money in your pocket, if you go by the conventional numbers, That's going to equal a lot more money going out, right? Unless what? Unless there are management changes. How are you changing what you're doing? Because throwing more money at the problem doesn't change anything. So we're going to play a little game called The Price is Right. Don't know if you've seen it. I did not win on The Price is Right. I played the lottery last week. My brother's a pastor. Justin Maddock was a huge influence on his life, so he became a pastor. Which is true, they were state FFA officers together. Justin's been an honorary member of the Whites forever. So my brother's a pastor. He calls me the day before the big lotto drawing, and he says, you have to go buy me some lotto tickets. I will put the money in the mail right now. And I said, what? I don't play the lottery. What? He goes, Tennessee, where he lives, is a mandatory reporting state, so you can't remain anonymous in Tennessee, but you can in North Dakota. So not only was he so certain that he was going to win this, he wanted to win it in a state where he wouldn't be known. So I went and bought him his lottery tickets. We won. I'll have you know we won. $4. And after I paid for the stamp to send him his winnings, I had $1.49. So I am a big winner. Let's play The Price is Right with a magical $10,000. So we're going to look at different enterprises you can have on your farm and ranch, and how soon can you make $10,000. Now, there's going to be a lot of debate about expenses and inputs and stuff, and we can certainly get into that in the Q&A session. But for now, let's just kind of do some gross numbers. So 10,000 bucks. So let's do commercial beef cows. There's a lot of cowboy hats in here. There's a lot of cow guys. Commercial beef cows versus my vegetable CSA, my piddly little carrots. I know some of you are laughing like, ha, ha, I would never grow that stuff. So if I wanted, I won't read the numbers to you. I did them twice and I had John check it. John's the number guy, so they're right. So in order to gross, generate $10,000, I need 10 calves. If I want to generate $10,000, my vegetable CSA, I only need to do 16 shares. And when we started, we were doing 22, and we grew from there. Friends of ours are doing 100, 150, 200 shares. So to generate $10,000, I only need to feed 16 families. It's fairly easy. I did it with 3 tiny kids. You can. So, and what's the difference here? I have all the money by April 15th. I don't need an operating loan because they are my operating loan, right? I buy seed, I buy a tiller, or whatever I need to go through the year. So you go to your banker and you say, I'd like to get into vegetable production. Annie Carlson just inspired me beyond belief, and I would like to grow vegetables. I think that's really where it's at. What are they going to ask you to do? They're going to go on their little calculators, right? And they're going to say, well, this is modern vegetable production. This is what you need to have. Aquaponics, high intensity, high input, everything under glass, vegetable production. Or you can do it the Annie way and just grow stuff and just feed people. So we had less than 2 acres in production at the height of our CSA days. We had less than 2 acres in production, and I was making more money than John was making on his tillable land. And so we thought, why are we tilling? This is ridiculous. We weren't tilling. We were no-tillers. Why are we even planting grain? So you can do vegetable production on the other side. Let's compare commercial beef cows to broiler chickens. I know how ranchers feel about chickens. They won't even order them in a restaurant, much less raise them. So broiler chickens, you pay $1.23 per chick. I just went on our hatchery's website and found the price. This is this year's price. Late breaking news. We sell them for $3.50 a pound in our buying club. We average 3 to 4 pounds processed weight, so frozen weight. They are processed in 8 weeks. So we moved back to the home farm, and we have some new neighbors, and we corrupted them. One of them is sitting right back there. We corrupted them, and now they raise pastured chickens. And she's a school teacher. She has summers off. They have 2 boys. They're done in 8 weeks. So between the end of school and the start of school, they can run a couple batches of broiler chicks, and they do. John and I start a little earlier, we end a little later, but we don't teach school. So in order to generate $10,000, you only need 816 chickens that are done in 8 weeks, start to finish. How long is start to finish for a calf? Slightly longer than 8 weeks. If you tell your banker, I want to produce broilers, and he inspired me again, I want to raise broilers, this is what they're going to tell you to put up, right? This is modern poultry production. 10,000, 25,000, 100,000 birds in a house, depending on how big you want to go. John is a very technical person. He's a machinist. This is our high-tech broiler production. If you buy materials brand new, which John does not know those words, brand new. If you bought all the materials brand new, it would cost you $100 to make a pen. And you can run 75 birds at a time. You'll run the birds in there for 5 weeks, and then you can put in new birds. So when Annie pencils out, and I've already done this, pencils out our 2016 year, I have batch 1 in, batch 1 out, batch 2 in, batch 2 out. And we run this stable of pens. It actually is a stable because they march along the pasture all the time. So you can reuse the pen. It's awesome. Let's talk about pastured pork. Again, we'll compare it to commercial beef cows. We pay about $100 per feeder pig. In the spring, you're going to pay more. In the fall, you're going to get them for a lot cheaper. So we buy in the fall, carry them over to the spring for our farmers market pigs, buying club pigs. Then we buy in the spring and butcher in the fall for our bulk order customers. So you feed them for about 6 months. We don't feed them any hot feed. They're not any gaining superstars. They're getting mainly whole grains, which everybody will tell you, you have to have the right micron size to feed pigs. Baloney. So we feed them for 6 months. Their diet depends on what grains we're able to source. And so John, when he gets out a pencil and a paper and a calculator, I'm fairly confident he's working on a ration. So we sell them for $600 whole hog customers. If they buy it by the package in our buying club, it's significantly more. It's over $1,000. So that's what we're retailing pigs for. So I gave you the low number, $600. To generate $10,000 worth of income, I only need 17 pigs. And I only have to feed them for 6 months, and then they go to freezer camp. And I've got my 10 grand. If you want to get into pork production, you go to the bank, what is he going to tell you need to build? Modern climate-controlled facilities because pigs cannot handle weather. Baloney. Our pigs, it was 20 below the other day. They were laying outside sunbathing at 20 below. And those are our pigs. John plants a cover crop after the pigs go through an area. Plants a cover crop, it grows up. We graze the flurd through it a time or two, and then we'll bring the pigs back in to literally hog it down. And so they're back in there cleaning up after the flurd's gone through. And the blurry one in the back, he's running with joy. Pastured eggs. I was telling Donnie and Tricia Fearing this morning that eggs are our gateway drug to Morning Joy Farm food. Eggs are cheap. They're $4 a dozen. Cheaper than a pack of pork chops, cheaper than lamb chops, whatever. So it's a really easy thing for people to buy. They're not committing to a whole hog or a whole lamb. They're just committing to a dozen eggs. And the difference between a grocery store egg and a farm-raised pastured egg is night and day. And so when they see that difference and taste that difference, then they're like, holy mackerel, I bet all the rest of their stuff's that good. We think it is, but we're completely biased. So you're not going to make a ton of money on eggs. I'm just going to warn you about that. Do not start going out and buying a bunch of chickens. We have chickens as the gateway drug to the rest of our products, and not as a entire, this is the end all, we're only going to raise laying hens. If I need to generate $10,000 in a year, I only need 140 hens. A word of caution, when you buy the chicks, they don't start laying the next day. It's 6 months that you wait and you feed those chickens every day and there's no eggs, and it's 6 months, and then they start laying and then they flood you with eggs. But just a word of caution, there's a lag time. Not quite as bad as beef cattle, but there's a lag time to get started. If you want to do modern egg production, they're going to tell you to do this, right? Now cage freeze all the big deal. It's the same structure, just take the cages out, and mass chicken pandemonium is what you have. So this is our fancy setup. That is a stock trailer. Since the oil boom, it's been really hard to find cheap stock trailers, but John is committed. And like I said, he does not know the words brand new. So we have a couple of these. We call this our cluck wagon. So the cluck wagon rotates around and follows after them. I go out with my mug of hot cocoa, and we have a great morning together. Pastured turkeys. John and I are on the verge of busting out in turkeys, because turkeys, I can sell them in 2 days. We put them up for sale, in 2 days they're all gone. So the market is definitely there. They take 16 weeks from hatching to supper. They average 18 pounds. Your hens are going to be a little more. They're about 12 to 18. The toms are heavier, of course, they're 18 to 24. We sell that for the same. Our poultry price is the same across the board at $3.50. And so to get $10,000 generated on turkeys, you need 160 turkeys. We have arranged them in the poultry shelters. We have done them in a poultry net. We prefer the shelters, which limits the number of birds you can put in a group, but it keeps them safer, and mountain lions do not jump over the fence and eat your turkeys. Turkey production, again, very similar to broiler production. Large factory houses, they'll have 20,000 turkeys in a barn. And there's the Carlson family turkeys. We're not real happy with the broad-breasted turkeys, either bronze or white, that we're raising right now. They don't breed naturally, so we have to order poults every year. It's not a very sustainable system. So Henry has now had the farming bug bite him, and so he is going to start raising bourbon red turkeys. And then, because we're not sure if we want bourbon reds or the standard bronzes, I'm raising some standard bronzes, and we're going to see what happens. But then that allows us to hatch our own chicks. Poults. Let's compare it to sheep, and if there's a cuss word bigger than chicken to a rancher, it's sheep, right? So sheep, we raise Icelandics, and I've raised conventionals. Remember, we had 500 of them, and it was awful. It was awful. Every horror story you've heard about sheep is absolutely true with those sheep. So we raise Icelandics. They run about $100 a ewe. We like to go in. We don't buy them when they're ones or twosies on Bizman. We buy when flocks are dispersing, and then we go in and pick, because the ones or twosies are there for a reason. And so we average 1.6 lambs per ewe. We'd like to get that up to 2, but we breed our ewe lambs, so that number is always going to be a little less than 2. I don't want triplets. Sheep have 2 teats for a reason. I don't want any more than 2. So we usually process in October, and our bulk lamb price is $300. Again, if you're buying it by the package, it's substantially more. So in order to generate $10,000, we would need 34 lambs. So you can do those numbers back to, 1.6, et cetera, how many ewes you'd actually need. Sheep production. That is actually the horror that I lived. That's my mother in the brown shirt. We are doing a field trip for children. We actually told children they should raise sheep this way. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh, I feel bad. I need to send an apology to all those school kids. So this was us, lambing jugs, 4x4 pens where each ewe has to go because she can't figure out which kid is hers. So you have to put them in these little pens. And then you have maternity pens where you put them inside so they lamb. They're not lambing in snowbanks. And then you have group family pens afterwards. And so there's a lot of pens involved. And when there's a lot of pens involved, there's a lot of poop involved. And then there's a lot of feed. I told John, if somebody finds the number infinity, that is the number of buckets of feed I have carried to sheep. Buckets of water. Every little pen, you had to carry buckets of water to. It was horrible. Horrible, I tell you. And so then there's these guys. So that's one of our herd ewes. She's one of our best ewes, Ruth. And the little one nursing underneath her is Strawberry, one of our nice ewes now too. And so obviously there's snow on the ground. She had them outside. The vast majority of our ewes will lamb outside, and we give them the choice. They have a deep-bedded barn, warm, safe. I'd sleep in there at night. Vast majority of our ewes lamb outside. They have a big area they can go to. Some trees are in there. We have shelter belts. The whole area they can choose from. We have some ewes who will hide their lambs. About a third of them will hide their lambs. We don't even know they've lambed. Where's so-and-so today? I don't see her around. And we start looking, and she's standing over there, lamb hidden underneath some trees. So they lamb on their own. in the years that we've had Icelandic sheep, last year was our first year with a bottle lamb. And people ask me, did you get bottle lambs or did you get sheep so your kids could have bottle lambs? Are you freaking kidding me? I raised bottle lambs as a kid, and I would not wish that on my worst enemy, much less my own children. But Jana was up for the challenge. She fed that thing the whole time, and it paid off for her. So going back to the basics, Icelandics are seasonal breeders, which means if I wanted to lamb in January, which I do not anymore, no way, no. If I wanted to lamb in January, I could not do it with these Icelandic sheep. They do not cycle until October, most of them in November. So they're seasonal breeders, which guess what? I don't have a ram pen. I don't have rams trying to bust out or bust me. He runs with them the whole time. He prefers the cows until it's go time, and then he likes the sheep. But he prefers to stay with our cows. They lamb outdoors, no jugs, no nothing. Go. They're exclusively grass-fed. They don't know a bucket. And there's a great picture my brother and I found of my dad sitting on a bucket in our feedlot with the lambs, and all the lambs are crowded around him, right? Because they know what's in that bucket. I walk out in a bucket with these fools, and they look at me like, what's that white thing? They don't even know what a bucket is. Which is good, but if they get out, slightly problematic. Because when the other ones got out, we could just rattle the oats, right? And then they'd come running. Not these guys. They're a little smarter. We rotationally graze, moving them every single day, and I tell you every single day, and then I say, except for this last year. We have a thicket east of our place, and when you put something in 20 years of CRP and the wind blows from the west, and all the Chinese elm seeds blow to the east, and you get this beautiful thicket of this tall Chinese elms. They're horrible. You can't even get through them. So we used our tools, and we shoved the sheep in there for about 2.5 months this summer and said, destroy it. They're more similar to goats in their physiology, so they like browse. So they stripped those Chinese elms as high as they could reach, and then they taught the cows to eat the same way. We do shear them twice a year, as opposed to once a year with your regular woolies. We do shear them twice a year, but their wool is quite valuable. We send that to a processor most of the time, and have it spun into wool and felt, and so we're selling that too. We sell it as yarn and felt. And then this year we're starting to tan the pelts from our butcher lambs. So we didn't shear our butcher lambs, we left them full fleece on. And so a butcher lamb, a Suffolk butcher lamb, has terrible wool. When we first sheared these Icelandics, I grew up on a lot of wool. Shearing day was the best day ever. And so I was packing the wool and I was like, and I told John, if you don't find me in bed tonight, I am out here sleeping in the wool. This stuff is luxurious. It's so awesome. And so we left the wool on these lambs this year when we had them butchered. We're going to have the pelts tanned as full fleece pelts. We're not going to have them combed out. We're going to leave them with the locks, and I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. That's them, bale grazing. That's our ram. Can you see the barrel on toothpicks? Barrel, toothpicks. We had goats at the time. We don't have them anymore because once my cow came into milk, John said, you don't have to milk everything. And so we sold our milk goats. That's once they bale graze. And you can't bale graze sheep. I don't know if you heard that, but you can't. That's what I read anyway. You can't bale graze them. And so I thought, well, they're a ruminant. They're slightly smaller. Why can't we? And because if you tell me I can't do something, that's pretty much a guarantee I'm going to try. And so I Googled, of course, bale grazing sheep, and found a bunch of articles tell me I couldn't. But I found one blog post from a farm in Saskatchewan that was bale grazing sheep. And I thought, if they can do it in Saskatchewan, Mercer, North Dakota is even better. So we bale graze, and as you can see on the other side of that gate is the next paddock of bale grazing. So they'll take it down to that. And what have you guys heard about sheep and goats? They waste a lot of hay, right? That's what you always hear. Well, it's physiological. So a cow has those big mouth, big lips, when she goes in to eat, she takes the whole thing. Sheep go in, and their lips are not big and fat. They're tiny and nimble. And so they'll take the stalk, and they'll strip the leaf off the stalk, and they'll eat only the good stuff. So do sheep and goats leave more on the ground? Yes. But if you get down on your hands and knees and look, It's the crap. It's the stock. It's the non-nutritious part. So yes, they will leave stuff, but they're far more efficient than your cows are. Afterwards, we turn in our pigs. Pigs are the most expensive thing we raise. They have to work hard for us. So we turn in the pigs into the bale grazing after in the springtime, and they compost it for us, turn it up, turn it over, and that's what we're left with. That's John's hand. And that's the spot where we had bale grazed that winter, and just look at that. I mean, just rich loveliness. So that's what we get after bale grazing the sheep. Joshua wanted me to talk about challenges that we have, because I've painted a pretty rosy picture, right? Look at all the money you can make. Look at it. There are some challenges, so I need to fair warn. First one, North Dakota Department of Agriculture is the challenge. They have a rule that, some of you are laughing. You have the same challenge apparently. They have a rule you can only raise 1,000 chickens. They only process 1,000 chickens on farm. Birds, not even chickens, birds, 1,000 birds total. So we do 900 broilers. We like to do about 40 turkeys. And then we always have some stewing hens that need to be stew potted at the end of the year. And so that takes us to our 1,000 birds. We can't go above 1,000 birds. That 1,000 bird limit is there for a reason. Because when you start doing 1,000 birds, that's when you actually start making money. And you have the same equipment that you use for 1,000 birds as you use for 3,000 or 5,000, or the USDA says you can do up to 20,000. So they're a challenge. They're also a challenge with our meat processors. The state inspection program is difficult for processors. That's why we have so many custom plants and quite a few less state inspected plants. In addition, the smoking and curing of pork is additionally difficult with the state regulations. There are 4 plants in North Dakota that can do state inspected smoking and curing of pork. The people who've just done cows, you're like, oh, there's way more than 4 state inspected. Yes, 4 large animals that don't require smoking and curing. Pigs, I can't sell a pig without smoking and curing, at least part of it, right? People want bacon, people want ham, I have to do it. So we have 4 plants. Second one, the poultry processing. You might say, well, Annie, then just take your chickens to the processor. I don't do my own beef anymore. There is none. I would love nothing better than to free up my summer days, not butchering chickens, even though I love butchering chickens, not butchering chickens, and taking them into a processor so I can do 3,000 chickens that my customers are asking for. I have nowhere to take them. The nearest one was in 279 miles away in Minnesota, and they just closed, and so now it's even farther. I've been working for 2 years to get a poultry processing plant up and running in North Dakota, and I will tell you, I am this close. It's not me. I'm not running a business. But I'm working with someone, trying to get him up to speed to do poultry processing. A guy in Missouri makes a plant in a box, USDA inspected poultry facility that he puts in a shipping container. I called all the meat processing plants in North Dakota and said, would you be interested in this? I can help you get financing. I put this plant next to you because they have, water, they have offal disposal, they have all this great stuff that they're ready to go. We can just bolt it onto the side. And when they got done laughing at me, the answer was, hell no. And so it requires separate storage for chickens. It requires, you can't shove a crate full of chickens in with your hanging halves of beef. No. So I'm this close to getting a poultry processor, and oh, the day that it happens, you will know. Large animal processing, I talked a little bit about that. It's hard getting someone to process pigs. The health department is not necessarily a challenge to me. They've been very helpful in what we're trying to do, both with the kitchen and with our retail meat license and all of that. But there's just hoops that you have to jump through. And so make sure you know what those are before you start doing what I've so inspired you to do. Licensing and fees. I just paid all my licensing to the 1st District Health Unit, which is out of Minot and runs McLean County as well. I pay the same licensing and fees as Dan's Super Value does, as Hugo's does, as, name your large chain, Sunmart, whatever you got. I pay the same licensing and fees. So when people say, well, how come your bacon is so much more expensive? I have a lot fewer pounds of bacon to spread that cost out on than Dan's supermarket does. So that's a challenge. You're going to pay the same fees as everybody else, but you're not going to be moving the volume of product yet that everybody else is moving. Insurance, if you want to just confuse your insurance agent, be a farm that also works in production and also retails, because there's no actuary table for that. And so how do we get insurance? Who's going to write this policy? And it has to be written just for us because no one else does this stuff. And so we have one insurance company that licenses us. It's fairly reasonable. John does that, so don't ask me what it is. He's in charge of that. We have one. And so I've kind of been knocking on the doors of Farmers Union and Farm Bureau saying, listen, if you guys are really for farmers, this is a huge need for farmers. I can't get an insurance policy. Our policy is not with either Farm Bureau or Farmers Union, I'll tell you that. So I'm working on them too to start helping us out. Neighbors, when I say that, my neighbor's sitting right there, so it's not him. If you're doing this kind of stuff, you have to be prepared to be weird. And you have to be prepared for your neighbors to go, those crazy Carlsons. So the first year we were on the farm, we couldn't access the CRP land because that was still under contract. So we had grazing everything in the 19 acres of the farmstead. So we had pigs and chickens and cows and turkeys and sheep and everybody. John calls it organized chaos. So we were like moving everybody around. It was a nice game of chess. And at one point during the summer, everybody was up towards the road. And so we live in a bit of a coulee. So you come over, one hill, and you come down and past our farm, and then you go up another hill. And they'd come shooting over the hill, and they'd slow way down. And then they'd go up the other hill. And I told John, we're going to start charging a toll. Like, if you drop below 25 miles an hour, you'd pay $5 to look at what we're doing. So the word was around town, after everything was up by the road for a couple days, that Carlsons were running a petting zoo. Because apparently if you have more than one species of livestock, you must be a petting zoo. So be prepared for the neighbors. And then so people ask us, well, where are you from? We say, well, Mercer, North Dakota, proud of it. Metropolis on the prairie. And then they say, wow, you sell 900 chickens in Mercer? No! We sell 6. Like, they think we're crazy. Nobody wants to buy our chicken. It's so much cheaper to go to the grocery store. Our neighbors on the other side of us, not my beloved neighbor back there, when we first moved, we were visiting with them, and so they raised cow-calf, and so we said, we're kind of wondering who there are for processors around the area, and where do you guys take your beef? And they go, what? And we're like, your family beef, where do you take it? Do you like it? We're trying to find out where we should go. Well, we don't butcher our own beef. What? And she goes on to tell me, and I have no poker face, so I'm sure it was this. So she goes on to tell me that, it's just much easier to buy it from the grocery store. And I was like, you're expecting consumers, the public, to eat it, and you don't even eat your own beef. I can't imagine that. So, your neighbors are weird, and you're going to be weirder, and that needs to be okay. The goal is an anti-fragile system. So John and I are doing all this crazy stuff. You're probably looking at it and going, my gosh, look at those fools. Like, we're doing all this stuff because we want an anti-fragile system. And if you want to read a great book that's going to kind of kick your brain in the rear end, Anti-Fragile, Things That Gain from Disorder by Nassim Taleb. I have it on my desk. I refer to it often. It's a good book. First thing we want is to focus on fragility rather than predicting and calculating probabilities. So we want to look at what are the chances of this actually happening, and do I need to plan for it and compensate for it? We were on the drive up here, and I was reading Successful Farming to my husband because we needed a little laugh, so we were driving. And some of you laughed, and some of you were like, I read it all the time. So I was reading Successful Farming, and we were reading the articles because we like to know what's going on in ag. I mean, we're both from the conventional world, so we like to know what our neighbors are up to. And so it was something about 2% of wheat will get this horrible disease, and you should spend $8 an acre to get rid of it. So John was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I have a 2% chance of getting this, but I'm supposed to spend $8 an acre so I don't get the 2% chance of getting this. Like, what? So then we want to reduce fragile components, water and petroleum. We want to conserve water. We don't want to waste it. The ducks have a different idea. They want to waste it. So we got to work with them. There's a little training involved. But we want to make sure we're using and being wise stewards of the water and petroleum. So John fires up our tractor. When we bought the farm, we bought a John Deere 4430 from my dad. For, as John put it, if I shot all the windows out and punctured all the tires, it's still worth more than what your dad's charging me. So my dad was like that. He wouldn't give it away, but he'd make sure he almost gave it away. So John starts it once in November to put out our bales, right? And then maybe once in March or April to set out a couple more because we don't know how long we're feeding. And so that's the extent of the 4430 use. We want to create redundancies. We want to have backups into the system. And so my sister-in-law, who's very much a city girl, born and raised outside of Seattle, said to me, well, what about this avian influenza? What about that? And I said, what about it? I said, we didn't have an issue because our chickens are outside. And she's like, well, what would have happened if you lost the whole flock? And I said, well, that wouldn't have happened, but if it did, we have other income, right? Our income is not solely on chickens. Would we be out some bucks? Would we say, well, that stinks? Yeah, but I don't owe the bank for my high-tech chicken shelters. I don't owe the bank for my pre-mixed feed. I have a husband, he's the pre-mixer. I don't owe on this stuff, and yeah, are we out some money? Is the belt going to be a little tight? Yeah, but we've got other things going on. We want research to be holistic, a tinkering approach. We don't want it to be directed. We want to find out the exact number of barley kernels that chickens should consume in a day, and then tell everybody that's what they should do. What if your chickens don't like barley? Sometimes you have picky chickens. So we want a holistic approach. And John and I are always doing research. We call it research, but it's really just let her buck. Let's see what happens. And sometimes we go, we are never doing that again. Well, we learned that. So we want acute stressors with recovery rather than chronic. So we don't want chickens living and 10,000 of them crammed into one spot. That happens in the brooder when they get to about 3 weeks of age. They're big for the brooder. It gets kind of cramped in there. But then we move out to the pasture and it's, So we want more of an acute stressor. And then we want to love mistakes. Like I said, we will never do that again. Well, now we know. And they're small in harm, reversible, quickly overcome. When I visit with conventional farmers, and like I said, my heart is there, my neighbors are there, friends are there, and I visit with them, and there's no margin. Maybe some of you in the room are feeling that too. There's no margin. You can't let that calf die. You can't let that cow get run down and then haul her off to the sale barn. There's no margin. We want to build in margins. We had a ewe that when we sheared her, we had some inkling before we sheared that she was maybe a little wormy. And so we sheared her, we were like, oh yeah, definitely wormy. And so we thought, well, okay, how are we going to handle this? It's one ewe, it's not the whole flock. How are we going to handle this? And so it did not work out in our favor, is all I'm going to say. And but it's a small mistake, right? It wasn't the whole herd. We tried it with one, realized that didn't work. And now we're moving on. So we want to practice. We want to do mistakes. We want to have that margin built in. Ken's giving me the 5 minutes. Oh my gosh, we're almost done. We want to love randomness. We want to just love just throwing stuff out there. Let her buck. What's going to happen? It's going to be awesome. And we have found some really cool things. For example, these seasonal breeding crazy Icelandic sheep we have never had a lamb before the last week in March. Never. Our first lamb has always come the last week of March. Then it's another ewe, and then it's a heat cycle, and then the rest of them. And so this past spring, early spring, right? Really early for all of us. We had our first lamb March 10th. Now, if I'd have kept my bucks out and said, they're not going in until October 21st, or whatever your magic day is, I would never have known that this is interesting. It's earlier spring than we've ever had, that John and I can remember, and my sheep lambed earlier than they've ever had. Can they sense in the fall with their estrus cycle what the spring is going to be like? We have no idea. but it's random and we love it. So, ask me when we're going to lamb this year. So John was out watching breeding season this year. Like, is it going to be in early spring or not? We don't know. We're going to try it. And we want little to no debt. I don't have to explain to the banker why I don't have any chickens this year. I don't have to explain to the banker why my strawberry experiment failed horribly. Tricia asked me about it today, and I was like, no. But I don't have to explain to him, and I don't have to pay him for the chance of failing, right? So we want little to no debt. The future. That's my husband, quote. That's not him, that's his quote. If my husband was Michael J. Fox, I'd be at a different conference. Just once, I'd like for nothing to change. And then he said, wait, I don't really mean that. So this was in my farm and ranch guide last week. It was probably in yours too, I hope. That means we're getting the same one. So if you're a grain guy, and I'm a former grain daughter, does that inspire you to get out there? Does that inspire you to start working on your crop plan? You're going to lose on everything. So pick something you're going to lose the least on. This is in essence what they're telling you. I read the article. We're going to start some dairy production. That's a 32 cow rotary parlor. It might even be more than 32. I went to a field trip. Mr. Anthony Larson was on that field trip with me, and I took my little 5-year-old daughter with me at the time, and we had been milking goats, and she knew what milking was. And so I said, we're going to go watch cows being milked. It's going to be really exciting. And so she stands there, and we watch the cows go around, and they're hardly touched by humans. And so my 5-year-old pulls on my coat. So I lean down, and I said, what? She goes, Mom, when are they going to milk? Because, milking means you touch them, and it doesn't happen in a big cow parlor. So we have these two, and that's their best side. No, I'm kidding. It's not. So we have these two, and I refer to Kira, the one on the right, as my 4th child, because she kind of is. And then Connell is the great-granddaughter of Kit Farrell's favorite cow. And then the calf this year is a Homer son. So I have a Homer on the sire side, and then a 100% grass-fed dairy cow on the dam side. And he's a beast, Jay can tell you. He's pretty awesome. And the cows went to cow camp over at Riser Ranch. And we don't call it bull camp because then I explain it to my kids. So we just call it cow camp. So they went to cow camp over there, and I said to Riser, I feel really bad for that black mark I put upon your herd because he's black and they're all red. And he was a black spot, literally, on their herd. And so we're going to start milking them. We've milked Kierlich in the past. She's really good. Easy milker, we love her. And we milk once a day. And so they raise their own calves. She raised Kierlich. Those two have never been more than about 40 yards apart, ever, in their entire lives. We want her to teach the calves how to eat, what to eat. We separate them at night and we milk in the morning. That means I only have to milk once a day. And then the calves milk the rest of the time. And we want them to learn how to be cows, learn what to eat, what not to eat. And then people always told me, she will never wean that calf. You'll have to wean that calf off her. She'll never wean that calf. We want to keep them on 10 months. And the difference between the heifer on the left and the cow on the right is huge. When you start getting all Gerald Fry on her, and you start looking at her endocrine whirls and all this stuff, the heifer on the left, who nursed for 10 months, like Gerald recommends, amazing. She's amazing. John said, should we let Jana take the heifer to the fair? And of course you can't, because she's a clover bud, but that's a whole other issue I can go off on. But I said, we can't let her go to the fair. Number one, no one's going to believe she's half milk cow. And number two, she's going to be faulted for being too finished. Because she has the butterfat pinches on her tail head. She's got that nice belly roll in front of her udder. She's too finished for the heifer show. And I judge livestock with Donnie Faring, so I know these things. So we're going to throw this against conventional dairy. For most of 2015, milk was at $16 a hundredweight. It's gotten better this winter. It's about 18 or 19 right now, but for most of 15, it was $16 a hundredweight. Go. That's about $1.38 per gallon. That's farm gate price. That's what the farmer's getting. So if I want to generate $10,000, I need 7,246 gallons of milk. If I were to sell raw milk, which is illegal in this state, another ag department issue, it's illegal, verboten. Dairy farmers can drink their own milk, but nobody else. So $6 per gallon, I would need, and we have friends in Minnesota who are charging $8, and they still sell out. So we're gonna be lowball, we're gonna say $6 per gallon. I only need 1,666 gallons to generate $10,000 worth of income. We have a very ambitious fencing project coming up. Our watershed coordinator is not quite certain if he wants to play ball with us on fencing or not. We love Gallagher Smart Fence. If you're fencing anything other than cows that require more than one strand, Gallagher Smart Fence is awesome. We bought a food trailer this year. That's my new adventure. We're going to breed our own laying hens. Those are some Icelandic chickens we got a hold of. We're pretty excited about them. Look at him. Doesn't he look awesome? Like that says rooster, doesn't it? The capital R. We got some guinea hens. We're going to breed them.